What minor movie injuries could be fatal in real life? Catching someone who's falling at speed, especially by one arm. Either they're going to pull you down with them, or everyone is getting an arm dislocated at best. If your chest is halfway off, chances are good for some broken ribs. Might not always be fatal, but definitely isn't minor. My boss fell off the climbing pegs of a cell phone tower. He was about 5 feet above me. Catching him while holding on to the tower left me with a dislocated shoulder on one side and a sprained elbows and dislocated wrist on the hand that caught him. It was basically the perfect situation for it, and unbelievably painful to do. With "how did you even get down and why weren't you," well, he, mostly, but both, clipped in. We were in harness. His arrestor actually came apart, so when he slipped, nothing was attached to the tower anymore. He was in the process of moving his safety strap when he fell. I held on to the climbing peg and didn't let go, because I didn't think of it. Otherwise, my safety strap and arrestor would have easily held us both with no trouble. They just didn't even get tension on him. As for getting down, I snagged his harness on a step peg and left him hanging, while I just stayed attached to the tower, and we ended up using a winch to rope me down once they got him down. He refused to ever climb again. I ended up being ground crew for the rest of the time I worked for that company, which wasn't long once I lost the climbing bonus. Saved my boss. You'd think that would give you some extra rights or something. Like you put yourself on the line to save him. Basically, anytime a superhero catches someone. If the superhero is stationary when they catch someone, then they are no better than that person just hitting the ground. They need to drop with the person and slowly decelerate them. Gwen Stacy would agree, but comic books have since completely forgotten this bit of basic physics. In the Michael Keaton Batman movie, he and Vicky Vale are falling at terminal velocity, and Batman ties a cable around the two of them and batarangs the other end of the cable to the tower they are falling from with an abrupt stop. Have you ever used an egg slicer and pushed those little wires through the peeled hard-boiled egg? Shipwreck scenes where the character goes unconscious but eventually wakes up, washed up on a beach. In the real world, that's known as drowning and is 100% fatal, especially in a violent ocean storm. Doesn't everyone just spit out some water and get back to their day? I'd never thought about how much of a common trope this is until now. But it's always like they fall down a waterfall or fall of a ship, go unconscious, wash up on shore, and then cough out a bunch of water before continuing on with their day. The idea behind these is that the character fights for their life with every ounce of strength, reaches the beach, and then passes out. But so few films show that middle bit that it just looks like they passed out while swimming and somehow just floated safely to shore. I like to imagine a group of orcas playfully bouncing the castaway's limp body around as a game until they reach the beach and the tide recedes. I think the trope may be going back to the Greeks that put together water and being born/reborn. There have been cases where people have found themselves after a shipwreck not fully knowing what happened. But yeah, it requires more specific circumstances. In a military context, the people who experience such things almost always had life jackets on. A lot easier not to drown that way. I do believe not all of them, though. RC, at least a couple of the survivors of ships which blew up completely, like HMS Invincible in WW1 or HMS Hood in WW2, noted essentially waking up in the water after being blown off their ship. Of course, that was only a matter of minutes of semi-conscious time as opposed to hours, though. There was one fairly well-known case that stuck with me, the sinking of the Andrea Doria, where a little girl didn't know or even understand what happened or where she ended up after a shipwreck, but that was because collision threw her onto the ship which hit the Andrea Doria. So she was never at risk of drowning. The other ship was the Stockholm. They collided. I think the Stockholm's bow pierced the Doria in the side and made a huge hole. The Stockholm reversed engines and backed away, carrying the kid from her cabin with it on the crumpled, ice-breaking bow. The Doria sank from the massive hole, and the Stockholm was able to pick up the lifeboats from the Doria. Crazy luck for the kid not to get crushed or drown. I never interpreted it that way. I always imagined they regained consciousness, then swam to shore off-screen so exhausted they passed out on the sand and didn't wake again till morning. Yeah, I always consider it cinematic shorthand for they fought exhaustedly to get there. Let's cut to once they've got there. Imagine a 6-hour movie and 5 hours are just the guy swimming. An explosion that knocks you over. Never mind one that throws you. I just started Criminal Minds, and there is an episode with a car bombing that I found very believable. One character is thrown, and there is a very awful trail of blood and skin debris leading to the character's body as it landed and slid across the street. I wasn't expecting the amount of detail in that scene. How about the trope of an explosion in a hallway or tunnel? I'll just hide around the corner and it'll all be okay, instead of having their brains and guts pulverized by the shock wave in a confined space. Arguably, Victor's death in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is caused by Victor being too close to the dynamite when it goes off, which causes internal bleeding, which ultimately leads to his death. But that's Del Toro. He doesn't really play by Hollywood rules. But what if I'm running away from it and leap at just the right time? Why leap when you can put on sunglasses and walk away looking cool? The Hurt Locker's opening is the first time I saw explosion damage close to what I think is the reality of it. So far away and covered in proper protective material, and still the concussive damage annihilated that soldier. The concussive damage of a properly formed explosive is insane. You can feel it in your chest from a milk jug filled with gas getting lit from like 20 yards away. An actual grenade shakes your entire soul at that range without cover. That's one reason you're supposed to call when you throw a grenade. Anybody that can hear you might get a brain injury if they don't duck. Or just deaf. Either way, explosions do way more damage than just the fragments. The other guys had a great part when they were close to an explosion. Will Ferrell said something along the lines of, "I need a MRI. Oh my God, there is no way I don't have soft tissue damage." I call bullshit when people just walk away from explosions. That scene in Star Wars where they just fly away from the exploding Death Star, I call bullshit. Action movies really sold us the idea that people can walk off explosions. If a blast is strong enough to throw you, surviving is only the beginning of the battle. James Bond has this happen to him in 007 First Light. It's pretty early in the game, so not really a spoiler, but he essentially has a bomb explode damn near in his face and is just knocked unconscious. That's why the whole game is him in a coma. First light is the light he needs to avoid to escape the sweet embrace of death. Yeah, I imagine the overpressure needed to rupture eardrums wouldn't even move you, so to get thrown is basically an atomic bomb test film. Concussions and losing consciousness are super bad for you. Like months to years to never of recovery in some cases. I had an ex-coworker who got punched in the head by a patient and got a concussion from it. He was never really the same after his head injury. Had a seizure and hit my head on the counter. 2 years removed. I will say someone's name in one sentence and completely forget it for the next. I got a bad concussion where I lost consciousness and don't remember part of the day. I have frequent instances where I struggle to find words. It's weird. Sometimes I'll know the first letter or a synonym, but the word is just lost. I feel like it makes me seem dumb. See, I will literally pause while talking as I try to think of the word. That is called post-concussion syndrome. There are numerous ways that it can present, and multiple can be present in the same case. I don't get this much anymore, 12 years post, but I still deal with aphasia and tinnitus, and my short-term memory is getting worse. Very similar. My coworker was sitting on the hood of a car, slipped and fell off, and hit his head off the pavement. He was never the same either. Frightening. My buddy had a few too many, was sitting on the tailgate of his Tacoma and fell off, hitting his head. He died from the injuries. Doesn't take much. I really wish I didn't have the concussion collection that I have. I had a few when I was younger, and yeah, I'd change things around if I could. 2 of them I was out for several seconds and didn't really know what was happening. I got kicked full force in the back of the head during a sanctioned fight. Didn't get knocked out, but I was definitely on another planet and just moving in autopilot. I don't remember any of it. I would say it literally took maybe 5 years before I stopped having random stare into space moments and double that before I felt normal again. I played soccer and football in high school and was a kicker in college. I normally didn't do kickoffs, just extra points and field goals. Our punter had a better leg and handled kickoffs. He got hurt, so I had to handle kickoffs, and I got laid out on a kick return with a helmet-to-helmet hit. I don't remember the rest of the game, and I kicked 2 extra points, a field goal, and kicked off 3 more times that game. I got headaches for 5 months and had trouble concentrating for a year. Like I would sometimes feel like there was something fuzzy in my head obscuring what I was just thinking about. My senior year, a freshman started over me, which pissed me off at the time, but in retrospect was good, because with the punter graduating, I would have picked up kickoff duties. And then that freshman ended up in the league 3 years later. I got knocked out by a camel when I was 15. It still hurts 20 years later. Fell 3 years ago and snapped my neck back and gave myself a concussion. Still recovering, 24/7 headaches, not back to work full time. It's life-changing. Years ago, while playing football, I got grabbed by the jersey and pulled backwards, which caused me to hit the back on my head on the ground. I was knocked out for a minute or so, then had a very bad concussion for a few days after. It took me years, though, to overcome the effects of that concussion. I had bad headaches on and off and paranoids of dizziness. So it always makes me laugh when someone gets knocked out and then they get up fine a few minutes later. I had a lot of concussions when I was a kid, and I forgot what I was going to say. Same. I often wonder how much smarter I would be without having had them. Yeah, I got lucky, sort of. I was hit by a car in January of this year, and I was knocked unconscious for a couple minutes. I lost my memory for a couple hours when I woke up. The doctor said I don't have any lasting damage, but it was something. I got punched in the head while sparring, felt fine, and then spent 4 months in severe depression and constant pain. Getting hit in the head is no joke, bro. Yup, I worked with a guy who was a cop literally for like 60-something years. Back then, in the 60s and 70s, cops used saps. A sap is a little handheld leather thing with a bunch of lead on one end. You basically smacked someone in the head really good, and boom, out like a light. The damn things basically created a shockwave moving through the skull. He said it was like hitting a switch. Hit someone and bam, it's lights out. They got banned at some point, and everyone at the departments cut open their saps and put lead shot, like from a shotgun shell, so that when you hit someone, the impact got spread out. The reason was so you didn't get an obvious split in the skin where the suspect got hit. But here's the really bad part and why they got banned. You had these officers using saps. They were basically the taser of their day. Well, sometimes these people on the receiving end of a sap, sometimes they would die hours and hours later. It got to where everyone knew what a sap looked like. So there was a company that made a sap baseball cap. You could take it off your head and smack someone with it. I have one of these, but it's called a blackjack here. It's basically a lead weight on a hard spring wrapped in braided leather cords. Just tapping your hand with it hurts. I'd never hit someone on the head with this thing. At full force, anything it strikes is going to break. Yeah, they would be used in like action or spy movies, where some henchman would whack someone in the back of the head with a blackjack or similarly shaped weapon to knock them out. Like, yeah, it'll definitely knock someone out, but whether that person is able to wake back up and be able to answer questions or give up intel is not very likely in the real world. Lol. I always laugh when someone gets a bottle broken over their head in a movie or TV show and they don't fall to the floor or get knocked out, because bottles don't break as easily as you think, and you could easily kill someone with a blow to the back of the head. I physically shudder at the Home Alone 2 scene where Marv is catching bricks to the dome. I think full-on slapstick comedy gets a pass. It's almost like complaining about the amount of punishment Homer Simpson takes. This is the one. I work in a trauma unit, and I've had several people end up with a part of their skull removed to allow the brain to swell without damages, for hitting a low pole or tripping down the stairs. A part of their skull removed to allow the brain to swell without damages. It's fun how, every now and then, ancient quackery like trepanning turns out to have genuine modern medical applications. Came here to say that. Getting knocked out in movies and TV is just something that happens nonstop. In real life, people can die very quickly. I believe that's how Liam Neeson's wife died. There's a pivotal moment in Falcon and the Winter Soldier where a character dies instantly because he falls and hits the base of his skull on a cement corner. I was like, okay, finally some realism. He came down full force on the hindbrain, which controls some of the most basic and primary life support functions. In any other show, the character would have woken up a few minutes later and been a little dizzy. Not this time. Insta-death. There is also that guy who dies from a punch in the chest from the super soldier girl. Also the fact that she was visibly upset because she wasn't really trying to kill him. It felt like what it would really happen if a regular soldier tried to fight someone who recently acquired superhuman strength. Especially from the back of the head. The old shovel to the back of the head to knock someone unconscious is about as safe as shoot him in the gut, he'll live. Throughout the Transformers movies, there are a couple times where someone's head or body comes into contact with a Transformer. In one scene, the Transformer is trashing and tossing objects and people. I kept asking, why isn't that dude's head splattered like a watermelon? Has anyone ever tried headbutting a car going 30 miles an hour? I swear, one of these days you're going to wake up in a coma. Giant pipe wrench to the temple. Hero, or supervillain, just gives a slow, angry look with a slight trickle of blood. The way I have smacked my head on the dryer door or an open cabinet and wanted to faint in pain, compared to these dudes taking fry pans to the face and baseball bats to the side of the head and getting back up to ask for more, is truly so fucking annoying. That one scene with the nail on the stairs, besides being deeply uncomfortable to watch, is also a go straight to the emergency room situation. When I was 5, I stepped on a nail in our backyard. I was using some old boards as a balance beam because I liked gymnastics. I walked about 20 feet with the nail half in my foot. My mom put Bactine on it, it was 1986, and sent me back outside to play. That nail was rusty as fuck, and IDK how I'm even alive. I can't even imagine doing that to my son. But we were extremely poor, and IDK if they had stuff like free medical care like we do now if you're poor. We had food stamps a year later, actual little booklets that looked like stamps. I sliced the side of my leg open on the corrugated metal side of an old rusty pole barn when I was a kid. Like deep gushing blood, 4 to 5 inch gash down my leg. My dad poured turpentine on it, put a stack of blue shop towels over it, taped it with some painter's tape, and told me to go lay up at the house until my mom got home. She got home several hours later, also did not take me to the doc for stitches or a tetanus shot, but did wrap it up nicer and put Neosporin on it. Thinking about it as an adult, I'm kind of shocked, but then it was just a mild nuisance. My grandparents were DIY house flippers before that was a thing. Sometime in the early 90s, I was playing on an old metal swing set in a yard of one of the houses they were working on and sliced the inside of my thigh open on a bolt sticking out of the supports when I slid down it. I will never forget my grandma washing it and tying paper towels on it with twine, because that was all they had in the house. At some point, I'm sure my mom picked me up and bandaged it better, but I just remember being really uncomfortable and annoyed that I couldn't run around anymore because the itchy twine would fall off. My parents built an addition onto our house when I was a kid. They told me not to play outside in bare feet in case I stepped on a nail. Well, I went out in bare feet and stepped on a nail. I didn't want to get in trouble, so I didn't tell my parents. Later, when I had a scar on my foot, I snipped it out with nail clippers so they wouldn't see it and ask what happened. Kids are dumb. My brother once texted me a picture, with no caption, of his daughter at the hospital with her freshly broken arm in a cast. I asked him how it happened and he said, "I still don't know because she doesn't know." Complete with quotes. It cracked me up. Oh my gosh, these are the exact words I used after I used my mom's razor to try to shave my legs without any soap or water. I literally flayed the entire front of my shin off. I was like 7 or 8 years old and was told to not use that. When I was asked what happened, I said, "I don't know. Being current on your tetanus vaccine would explain why you were fine." I stepped on a nail back in early college that went right through my flip-flop and into the heel of my foot. This chick I was with said NBD and spit on her hand and rubbed it on my foot. And damned if I didn't have to drain that nasty wound before football practice every day for longer than I care to remember. Home Alone taught me that turning into a skeleton is survivable. A couple years ago, I grabbed a pot handle that had just been in the oven and burned the shit out of my hand. A few days after that, I randomly watched Home Alone. You would not be able to just continue on after grabbing the red-hot doorknob. Ever watch this? Harry would die 9 times, Mar 14. Just slash step kgm torov qf1 c ton. Skull fracture with epidural hematoma. Marv is dead. 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 Ah, you beat me to it. Love that series. The Die Hard ones are great too. The brick to the head in Home Alone 2 was one of the funniest scenes I'd ever seen as a child. Now I cringe. Home Alone 2 was straight up early torture porn, light years further than the Three Stooges. There is a medical entertainment podcast called Sawbones that has done several Home Alone themed episodes with a physician discussing the real-life severity of injuries. Haha. If something hits you with enough force to send you flying, that is ER at minimum. I think I saw a lot of blows like this in The Boys, and I'm like, for non-supers, they wouldn't just get up. Reminds of the show Andor, that had those big droids throwing people in the air several feet and falling to the ground, and you would expect movie logic and they would just shrug it off and run away. But no, just people dying and laying there after those fatal falls. It was a pretty impacting way of showing violence in a show that can't really show explicit violence. Yeah, I learned that the hard way in January. Got hit by a runaway snow tube with 2 adults in it. It sent me flying up in the air and I landed hard. Resulted in a level 3 liver laceration. Thankfully, it did not need surgery, just some heavy-duty pain meds and monitoring. Thank goodness for my husband because I didn't think I was that injured and wanted to go home and sleep it off. I suppose it's not gory violence, but Cassian does murder an unarmed man in the first 5 minutes. I think of Andor as one of the more violent pieces of Star Wars media, but as you pointed out, maybe that's just because it feels more realistic, visceral. I mean, Andor is objectively more violent than other Star Wars media. It has executions, suicides, torture, an attempted rape that ends violently, forced prison labor, and a literal massacre of a civilian population. It's by far the most realistic portrayal of violence of any Star Wars films shows. It's not just violence that everyone shrugs off, but it has real, realistic consequences. I think it was great because people romanticize the Empire because it is big and dark and imposing. But we forget what makes an actual empire, and that is the literal crushing of bones under their boots. We are spared much of that in the OT, so I get the simple black and white nature of the Empire and the rebellion. But there is blood on everyone's hands. And the show Andor basically says, well, how else do you think we got there? Hell, goes toe-to-toe with at least 2 soups this past season and killed them both. I think there was a missing scene of him taking V or something.